Hello and welcome to the SMEFocus show powered by MTDCNC. I'm Mark Weymouth from the Sensor Specialist Plus Automation. I'm your host this week to carry on the great work this show does in highlighting UK manufacturing and in particular SMEs. My guest today for this New Year episode is Mike Wilson, a passionate supporter of UK manufacturing and a campaigner for robotics and automation. Hi Mike.
Thank you.
If I kick off with an obvious question, I guess it's fair to say, Mike, that you've got robotics in your blood after many years working for Fanuc, ABB, Yaskawa, KUKA. Can you tell us more about how you got into robotics? Was it because of you encountering them at Rover?
Actually, when I was young, I was reading Asimov books, iRobot and such like, and I think that's what really got me started in robotics. I then went to do a degree in general engineering at Warwick University, and during that degree, I kind of decided that I really wanted to be in manufacturing, and I was particularly keen on robotics. And it was trying to find a way in, a place to start. And I actually went to Cranfield to do an MSc in industrial robotics, and we were actually the very first intake on that particular MSc, and it was that really got me into the space. That's what allowed me to then get the first job at what was then British Leyland Rover Group, actually working on robotics. So I think it's really been something I've always wanted to do, and I've been lucky enough to have a career that's allowed me to do that throughout all of my working life.
Must have been amazing to actually have that passion so early and see how the world has changed in many ways, but wow, for robotics it really has changed.
Oh yeah, I mean, when I started, it was Cowley at the time, where they now make the Mini. When I started there were 2 robots on site, and they'd installed the Metro production line with about 20 robots on it the year before. Whereas at Cowley now, there's well over 1,000 robots on that site making the Mini. So you're right, Mark. It's changed enormously over it's actually 40 years since I started, which is it's a little bit scary when I think about it. But it's certainly been a journey, and it's certainly been very interesting.
And in your early days, did you believe robots would really leave big factories, go beyond automotive?
Well, as I said, I think I was kind of brought up reading the Asimov stories, and you always kind of felt that ultimately they might end up in homes, in society. But at the time, no, there was no kind of indication of that's where it really was going to go. That was all the science fiction, in the films and such like, rather than the reality. The technology that we were dealing with was certainly not capable of interacting with people in the way that we have robots now, and certainly not things like humanoids. I've got a story, if you like, from the past, if I may share it with you. Was back in the early days, there was a Japanese professor that had programmed a robot to throw a ball into a bucket, and people at the time thought this was amazing, until he actually admitted that what he did was program the robot to throw the ball and then move the bucket to where the ball landed. So he was kind of, to some extent, conning people, but in effect, we can program robots now with vision and AI and all those other capabilities that can do that kind of thing. So yes, the technology's moved on enormously, and the opportunities have moved on enormously as well.
Okay, well, it seems a good segue to my second question, which is, your current role is as Chief Automation Officer at the MTC. So can you tell us a little bit about the aims of the MTC, and then your role and what you're bringing to the MTC into manufacturing?
Sure. Well, the MTC was set up to help industry adopt technology, sitting between the universities, academia and industry, to take sort of clever ideas that industry's developed, that academia has developed, and developed them through the technology readiness level so that they can be applied in industry. And likewise, we also take challenges that industry faces and apply technology to them, either doing it ourselves or working with academia to solve those particular challenges. So we're there to help UK industry become more competitive, more productive by using specific technologies. And one of those technologies, and my particular area of interest, is robotics and automation. So we're fundamentally doing three things. We're showing industry the art of the possible, kind of what the technology can do today and what it can do tomorrow, so what they need to be aware of. We are solving challenges, as I said, so where things are not commercially available, we can bring those challenges into the MTC and develop automation solutions to addressing those particular challenges. And then the final piece of the jigsaw is we also help industry procure automation solutions, even where it's commercially available. A lot of businesses, particularly the SMEs, have not been through this journey before. And whereas people like me, my 40 years, we've made loads of mistakes over that time. And hopefully we've learned an awful lot of lessons. And we can help businesses avoid some of those mistakes, minimize some of the risks that are involved in adopting robots for the first time, to make their installations more successful. So we're there to help industry apply the technology as well as developing new solutions.
Okay, it's interesting you mentioning particularly trying to reduce the risk for SMEs who are clearly very risk adverse and limited budgets, and the need for, let's say, an increased certainty of success. Are there other aspects of MTC and your role in how you go about reaching out maybe more to SMEs than the bigger traditional backers?
I think I think it's fair to say that we reached out to industry in general. It's not specifically SMEs, but we are undertaking a number of activities that are probably more targeted at the SMEs. So as an example, we recognize that there are issues related to skills in terms of the adoption of robot automation. And the larger businesses have been able to develop those skills, and they've got the resources to invest in the people to do that. But there aren't specific training courses out there, or it's not even within some of the apprentice programs in terms of how a business can go and adopt automation. So we're working with what's called the Workforce Foresighting Hub, which is an innovate high-value manufacturing catapult activity, to look at the skills required by SMEs to adopt, to procure, implement and operate automation solutions. And the reason we're doing that is because we've recognized that there are skills missing, and it is things like writing of specifications so that you can actually determine and define exactly what it is you want. It is things like picking suppliers, as well as the technology issues about just operating the robots. So we're working through with input from the SME community, from the technology providers, and also from the educational providers to identify the gaps in the skills provision, and then to find ways of addressing those gaps, so that in future the SMEs will be able to access short courses, or the apprentice programs will include this kind of training, so that they're more able to then implement and procure these kind of systems.
Okay, interesting. For many years, maybe when I first came across you, which was many years ago, you've been highlighting the gap between the UK's adoption of robotics and then more generally of automation. Can I ask you a few words to not a few words, can I ask you many words to explain really how you view the UK's lack of automation and robotics and the issues it's really exposing us to?
Well, and I've said this many times, so I hope I'm not boring the audience, but the International Federation of Robotics does measure something called robot density, and that allows us to actually have a relative measure of robot adoption. I appreciate that doesn't encompass all of automation, but I think it does give us a guide as to what we're doing in comparison with other countries. And on that league table, the UK is currently 23rd, whereas we are the 12th largest manufacturing nation in the world. So we ought to be somewhere a bit higher up that table, really. The rest of the world is adopting robot automation at a much faster rate than we are. And that's then resulting in issues like our productivity not as being as competitive as it could be. We're something like 20 to 30% behind some of our major competitors in terms of productivity. And we need to address that to ensure that we can be competitive going forward. I think there are a number of reasons behind that, and it's difficult to pin it all on one kind of silver bullet. And I often say this: if it was one simple reason and I knew it, I'd have probably made a lot of money by now. But unfortunately, it's not quite as simple as that. And I think one of the key factors is things like people's perception of robot automation, particularly with SMEs. They often think it's more complicated than it really is. It's become much easier to apply and to operate. They often think it's much more expensive than it really is. It has come down in cost significantly over the last 10 years. And things that weren't cost competitive 10 years ago probably are now and are worth a second look. But I also think one of the big factors is culture. I like to quote an all-party parliamentary manufacturing group report that was produced, it's almost 10 years ago now, that was looking at the culture and competitiveness of UK manufacturing. And they called this report Making Good. If I can summarize a multi-page report in a couple of sentences, it basically said that in the UK, we're very proud that we keep all of our old machines running, whereas in Germany, they're very proud that they bought new ones. And I've said that many times over the last 10 years, and I always get smiles and nods from the audience when I say it, and I've never had anybody disagree with me. I think we do historically we don't invest in capital equipment. We do keep old machinery running, and therefore we're not using the latest technologies, and robot adoption suffers as a consequence of that. I think the other kind of key element to it, which is very relevant today, is when the Eastern European countries joined the European Union, we allowed free movement of labour with them from day one, and many other European countries did not. And as a consequence, we did bring in a significant number of Eastern European workers into our workforce, and they did a great job. There's nothing wrong with what they've done. They worked very hard, and they brought skills with them, and they were a great addition to the country. But what it did mean is that we didn't have to look for other ways of doing it. We took a kind of so-called low-cost labor route rather than necessarily implementing things like automation. But the consequence of that is that after the pandemic, and also as a result of Brexit, we're now suffering from labour shortages. The pandemic has led to a lot of people to retire, probably earlier than they otherwise would, and the Brexit has led to a lot of our Eastern European people going back to their home countries. And I understand from Mate UK that we've now got 61,000 vacancies within UK manufacturing alone. And we all know that there's lots of vacancies throughout all other sectors as well. And Mate UK estimate that those 61,000 vacancies, if they were working, could be producing £6 billion worth of goods. And to me, that's what the robot automation needs to be doing, is filling those vacancies, doing the mundane, the dirty, the dangerous kind of jobs, and then using the people that we have got where their skills add value to the product. And if we could be generating an additional £6 billion worth of manufacturing product, that would be of significant benefit to the country. And I think that's probably one of the other factors that's key at the moment, is I think people are now starting to realise that manufacturing is very important to the UK economy. We've allowed it to shrink over many years. We've offshored an awful lot of our manufacturing capability. And I think people are now realising that was probably a mistake. We need to be bringing some of that back. And the only way that we can do that, and the only way that we can be competitive going forward, is by much greater use of robot automation. So we've got to find ways of helping all businesses, but particularly the SMEs, because they make up 99% of the UK manufacturing. We've got to find ways of helping them to become more productive through the appropriate use of robot automation.
Interesting. I think I also look at the UK as how would you view it as a business? And if you look at the strong proportion of manufacturing that is SME businesses, and you look at the low level of automation and robotics, it's got to present the most fantastic opportunity to improve our competitiveness, improve the cost base. So yeah, it is shocking that things aren't being done. It does seem to be there's a bit more sentiment and more awareness of the minute. So hopefully maybe we'll see a renaissance, and certainly for the both of us being involved in automation, God, I hope so. It would be lovely to have some speedy growth and broaden the net of automation as an improvement mechanism.
Well,
I know that you're involved now. I know that you're involved now in the West Midlands Robotics and Autonomous Systems Cluster, which is a mouthful in itself. Can I ask you to tell us more about what the aims of the organisation is, what it's about, and explain it, and also maybe mention if there are other similar groups outside of the West Midlands? Clearly, that's our regional focus, but hopefully the audience is far wider than just the West Mids.
Sure. And basically, we started the West Mids, if I could call it RAS rather than Robotics and Autonomous Systems, the West Midlands RAS cluster. We started that because we recognised that in the UK, we've not been very good at joining up the different interested parties that are working in the robotics space. And the reason I say that, there are various organizations where these groups do get together, but they tend to be focused in particular areas. So we have BARA, which is largely the industrial robot community as a trade association. We have the UK RAS SIG, or the UK RAS network, which is a group of 35, I think it is, academic institutions that are also all active in robotics. But those two groups don't talk to each other. And there were other groups as well. And we felt that one of the big challenges was because they're organised on a national basis. And yes, the UK isn't a big place, but it is quite big, and it's difficult to organise things on a national basis when you've got such disparate groups of people. So we felt it was important to build a more local cluster where everybody's within, let's say, 40 miles of each other. So there's much more chance of getting people in the same room and getting them talking to each other. And part of the impetus to do this was looking at what was happening in other parts of the world. Odense, for example, started a robotics cluster a number of years ago now, and they've been very successful. They've grown 3 global robot businesses off the back of that. They've got thousands of students coming out of universities that are working in robotics, lots of startups, again, in robotics. And it's generating a life of its own almost in terms of an ecosystem that's both producing clever students that can develop robot solutions. It's helping the adoption of robots within Denmark. And Denmark, by the way, on that same league table where we're 23rd, they're about 6th. So they're way ahead of us. But also it's generating robot businesses that are there selling product and generating income. There's a similar group operating in Pittsburgh now that's generated over $6.5 billion worth of investment. There's about 100 robot businesses all operating in the Pittsburgh area. So, we kind of looked at that and felt there's no reason why we can't do something like that in the UK. We started in the West Midlands for a couple of reasons, partly because that's where we're based, but also because there are existing significant strengths in robotics in the West Midlands. So not only do we have some leading universities with people like Birmingham and Warwick, we also have 2 of the high-value manufacturing catapult operations, MTC and WMG. We have some good skills providers. So with Make UK and their Aston facility, and MTC and our apprentice training facility. And we also have some good strength in terms of industrial robotics. So we have the UK headquarters of some of the global robot businesses, people like KUKA, Fanuc and Schneider, for example. We have some strong systems integrators, and we also have some existing strong users. So people obviously like Jaguar Land Rover, but also other smaller businesses like Castings PLC, Mondelez, people that maybe you don't necessarily know a lot about, but they are using robots at quite a significant level. And what we're doing really is trying to bring all those parties together. We've created a steering committee that has representatives of all those different groups, and we're running events on particular topics relevant to robotics. So the first event we ran was around electrification and how robotics and automation could have a positive impact on electrification and manufacture of electrification type products in the West Midlands. We're planning one for early next year related to medtech. And the reason they're picking these particular sectors is these are areas that are of specific interest to the West Midlands community. They've already been identified by the West Midlands Combined Authority as being key sectors for the future prosperity of the West Midlands. And we're focusing, therefore, on the needs of the West Midlands. And as part of all of that, we're also engaging with Made Smarter, with the SME community, because we want to try and find ways of helping the West Midlands SMEs adopt more of the technology. And some of this is about peer groups, getting people in the same room so they can listen to people that have done it and been through the journey, understand the challenges and the benefits, and then take that on that journey themselves with help from people like us. So we see it as a it's an early stage yet. We've only started since May. We do have the West Midlands Combined Authority involved, and they have recently just concluded a piece of research to identify the value of this cluster to the West Midlands, and I'm very pleased to say that came out very positively. Now we are in contact with other kind of fledgling groups around the country. So there is a Scottish robotics cluster that's being created based around the NMIS facility and the National Robotarium up in Scotland. There is a Cumbrian robotics cluster, which is all focused around Sellafield and nuclear type applications. There's one being created in the Bristol area, another one in Yorkshire. But ultimately, what we're looking to do is try and help all of these clusters to grow, as it were, but to focus on the needs of their particular area, and then likewise join them up so that we can then help each other where we're developing technologies that might have applications into other sectors. So for example, we know that there is technologies being developed for the nuclear sector, for nuclear decommissioning in Sellafield, that ultimately will feed into manufacturing, because it's giving greater capability, sensing, intelligence to the automation solutions that will then be very applicable into the manufacturing sector. So fundamentally, we're just trying to join up more of these stakeholders in the UK so that we can make sure that we maximize the benefit to the UK, if you like, not just manufacturing, but all industry sectors, and also provide the best vehicle to help UK startups that are developing technology for them to scale, for them to be successful, because we do want there to be a UK robotics supply industry as well. It's not going to develop industrial robots, the likes of ABB, Fanuc, KUKA are doing that very well. But we do have a lot of systems integrators building solutions, and we do have a lot of startups that have come out of universities, and they're trying to scale and get their product into the market. And we think there's significant opportunity for the UK in this space. And we're just trying to find ways of joining that up and making sure that we can be as successful as possible.
Okay, really interesting. So, I mean, the robotics and systems cluster sounds a very positive thing. So that's probably the perfect lead into the final and traditional question within this interview session, which is looking forward. So we're just about to start the first full week of 2025. So can I ask you, what are your plans for the year ahead? And maybe more importantly, what are your hopes for 2025?
One of the key things that we're doing this year, apart from continuing with the cluster activity and all the other activities that we got underway, we do have an annual robotics conference that we hold at the MTC, and it will be in June. And at that conference, what we try very hard to do, along the principles of the cluster, is to get together everybody that's involved, from the academics through to the technology providers and the startups, as well as the industrial end users. And we're working hard to ensure that that's a successful event, building on the success that we had in 2024. And the reason I mention all of that is because we want to get more people involved, particularly the SMEs, because it's a lot of this is about making them aware of what the opportunities are, making them aware of what help there is out there, so that it's not as risky as they might think, it's not as expensive as they might think, to get people to start. We do recognize that there's a learning curve, and the first robot is always the hardest, as it were, because you do have to go up that learning curve, but we can help. And, you know, I have a great example of a business in the West Midlands that I love to talk about. It's a company called Walsall Wheelbarrow. And yes, they do make wheelbarrows, not surprisingly, but they're the only wheelbarrow manufacturer left in the UK. There are other people that assemble from product that's brought in from overseas, but they make 100% of the wheelbarrow, with all their components and sheet metal and such like coming from local vendors. So it is very much a West Midlands Black Country metal bashing business, a very traditional business. They currently have got something like 60% of the UK market for wheelbarrows. It's a real success story. And within their factory, they've got 20 robots. And those robots are doing welding, they're handling parts to presses, they're unloading tube bending machines and so on. They started looking at robots back in about 2012, and over the years they've slowly introduced more and more. But I kind of look at it as this is a very traditional metal bashing business, probably making something that most people don't think we make anymore. We probably think we import wheelbarrows rather than making them in the UK, but they're successful, and they've done it partly through the use of technology, but also partly because of their attitude to their workforce. They've not made anybody redundant off the back of putting the automation in, and they've upskilled the existing workers. So where they were loading presses before, they're now operating the robots. So it's been done very much in partnership, and they're very successful at it. And I like to point at it purely because if that's, you know, a business that's making wheelbarrows, they can put robots in and successfully adopt this kind of technology. There's an awful lot of other businesses, SMEs, that can do exactly the same. It doesn't have to be the high-tech industries. And that, to me, is one of the key elements of all of this. We've got to find ways of getting more businesses interested in looking at it. Now, I do think 2025 could be a very positive year. You know, we're expecting details of the industrial strategy. We're expecting much greater focus on manufacturing. So we're expecting more support. I'm not sure exactly what's going to come out of all of that, but I think even just the recognition that manufacturing is important is a very big start, and therefore I think everybody's feeling a bit more positive than maybe they have done for many years. And I go back to the conference. The thing that kind of started me talking about that was at our conference in 2024. I kind of said, well, I've been doing this a long time, guys. I really want to see a significant step change in UK adoption of robots before I retire. And basically, I'm running out of time. I am going to retire at some point, not anytime soon, but it is going to happen. And I really do want to see a significant step change. And I'm really hopeful that 2025 is the year where we really do start to see an acceleration of robot adoption in the UK.
Sounds like a good plan for 2025. I'll definitely support you on that. Not your retirement, but the increase in robotics and automation, Mike. Okay, well, thank you for that. And I'll do the wrap up of the episode. So I will just say to anybody, if you'd like to drop a comment or suggestion, or particularly if you'd like to appear as a guest in a future episode, please email inquiries@mtdcnc.com or contact myself, Stuart Whitehead, or Joe Reynolds. Thank you for watching. Enjoy the rest of your weekend and the new year. From me, Mark Weymouth, cheers, have fun.